In this video, I am going to run through making selections, introducing you to a couple of tools, a couple of options on your select menu, as well as a button that you'll have on your options bar. To get started, you're going to see that I have a series of different circles and ovals on my artboard, and they all have things in common. So I've got some that are filled with blue, some are stroked in blue, some are filled with blue and stroked in pink, and so on and so forth. So there are similarities, but some things that make them different. So if I needed to select some of these shapes that have something in common, I want to think about what's the easiest way to do that. Okay, so thinking about selections to date, what we've talked about is your black arrow, and that you can certainly select one of your objects by clicking it, or dragging out a marquee selection to select multiples. But what do you do if you've got things in multiple places? Okay, they're not close together, so a marquee selection doesn't work. Is there a faster way to grab them? And so you do have two tools underneath your arrow tools, and they should look familiar. One is the magic wand, and one is the lasso tool. Okay. Now, while these are the same tools that you have in Photoshop, they work just a little bit differently in Illustrator. So to get started, I'm going to grab my magic wand. And remember, magic wand in Photoshop uses color. Okay, so if I use this tool to click on something, namely, I'll start with this shape, which is transparent. There's no fill and just has a blue stroke. If I use that, it's going to look for other shapes that have color in common. Okay, so in this case, transparent, blue stroke. If I click on this one, the fill associated is blue, and it's going to pick up everything else that has blue. Okay. And just to clarify, I mentioned that this is transparent with the blue stroke. The stroke actually doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the fact that all of these are transparent. And that becomes really clear because when I hit this one that has a blue fill, it picks up everything else that has a blue fill, right? Or if I click on this shape, obviously this has a pink fill, and it's picking up all of the shapes that have a pink fill, okay? So it uses color, more specifically, it's using fill. Now, you also have your lasso tool, and remember your lasso tool is a drawing tool. It allows you to draw out selections. So again, let's say, I need a pretty wild assortment of these shapes. They have nothing in common. Some have a stroke, some don't, some are blue, some are pink. And to grab these, all I'm going to do is just draw out a selection. And I'm just literally drawing. And I just need to come back to where I started. And you'll see the items that were enclosed in that drawn out selection are now selected. Okay, so that's one way to approach that as well. However, you do have some more options. So moving up, I'm just going to grab my black arrow. I'm going to click off for a moment. And let's say I'm looking to select, and I click my first one, and I realize, there are some things in common. What can I do to speed up this process? While I have something selected and I have my black arrow active, if you go to your options bar, you'll see that you have a button here for select similar objects. And it uses different things. It uses, fill color, stroke color. Does it have a common fill and stroke color, stroke weight, things like that. So in this instance, if I say stroke color, it picks up everything now that has the same blue stroke. Okay. If I click off and say, okay, this is what I want everything that has the same fill and stroke, you see that those items are now selected. So it builds essentially on the magic wand, okay, but just gives you more options. Again, so it doesn't even have to have anything to do with color. It can be stroke weight, what the opacity is set to, okay, shapes, okay. Now, I'm not going to use shape here because none of these are exactly the same. I sort of hand you all of these, so I would get really sort of unexpected results there. I'm going to go ahead and click off again just to deactivate what I have here, and I'll come up to my select menu. And you're going to see that you have things like select all. Okay, obviously that grabs everything, not very complicated. I can select all that are active on the artboard. I can deselect, okay, just like you do in Photoshop. If I have a few things selected here, so maybe I've got a complicated selection um, where I need almost everything, but maybe, except 2 or 3 little things. So I might go ahead and just hold shift and click on this one, and maybe that one. And so with that selected, those 3, I now can say I want everything except these 3 by selecting inverse. Okay. I'll click off again, and I'll just click on one of these. And if I go back up with one selected, you'll see I have this option for same. Again, these options that are very similar to what was over here on your options bar. And then you also have things by object, which doesn't really apply here because I'm not using things like brush strokes or clipping masks. But again, I just want to make sure that you understand that there are a multitude of ways to select something. So again, here, I can say fill and stroke, and it's going to give me all of the objects that have the same fill and stroke. Okay. Now, I've run through this with really simple shapes, and while this will be handy with simple shapes and things that you draw when we create patterns, I wanted to use something a little bit more complicated again, just to illustrate, how and why this would be so handy. And so later in the semester, we'll work with image tracing, which basically is where you bring in a photograph, you use Illustrator to trace it out and create a vector representation. And so again, if I hover, you see all these paths lighting up. Okay, these are a lot of little pieces and parts making up this image. And what this does by using Illustrator to create an image trace, it makes this photograph now a vector, something that can be blown up and made quite large. And when I performed this image trace, I did it with 6 colors. Okay. And as you can see, again, as I'm hovering, a lot of these shapes are itsy bitsy, teeny weeny, and I don't want to have to manually select all of these. So if I wanted to recolor this, I could come in and select on one of them. And because this is a complicated image, I need to use my white arrow. So I will come in and select one range of color. You can see it's that gold. I'll come up here and say select all of the same fill color and see how it grabs everything for me. And now I can change my color, and I'll just come up here to my fill and grab something distinct, and I'll click off, and those have all been changed. Okay, so again, I'll do the same thing. I'll grab a darker color, select same fill color. I'll select a different hue. Okay, and I can keep going. Okay. And somehow I lost my green. I must have selected the same thing by accident. But again, you can see how quickly I can recolor this. So I've run through 2. I would just need to run through the other 4, or using the same technique, select and same, and then choosing a hue, and I could recolor the entire artwork very, very quickly.